This is going to be a fun Bitcoin video because we're gonna start zoomed out on the weekly to discuss the move into the parabolic bull run, the similar move that we get every cycle, and then we're going to dissect it more on the short term, the catalyst, because I think that's what a lot of us are actually waiting for in the short term is like, what's that catalyst move that is so reminiscent to previous bull cycles? When is that going to happen, and what is it? And I want to kind of try and define it, at least from how I'm seeing these charts. So hit the subscribe, hit the like. Let's jump into the video. So it's going to be zoomed out, but we're also going to talk about short-term price action and why there might be even more downside in the short term before the massive parabolic bull run. I want to start, there was this article I just came across. I think it will help give some really good context on the weekly. Bitcoin price to see massive move to new all-time high if chart pattern plays out. So this article talking a lot about, and there was somebody, I think on X or somewhere posting basically about the current setup that is happening within Bitcoin. And this is like the whole bear cycle that you see here. And then we have this descending broadening triangle that he talks about. And that's really the short-term catalyst, that the breakout out of that area. If we go to the weekly chart, we've been discussing these things, right? This channel that Bitcoin is currently in right now, lower lows, lower highs. That's what that article is talking about. But one thing I noticed in the article was how they were kind of comparing this cycle and even the descending broadening triangle to last cycle and having an extremely similar setup. And I wanted to dig into that a little bit because even going back even more cycles, it really illustrates something I think that we should be paying attention to right now. So here's this cycle, and you can see it. And one thing we'll talk about is just how this cycle has even a more nice setup, especially if we're looking at kind of like this cup and handle type of setup. But you can just see this general setup right into this consolidation at Bitcoin halving. And then we go look at last cycle. Check this out. Look at the similarity, right? Just this nice bear market setup right into this consolidation into the halving. And there's the falling channel, and then there's the breakout after the halving. You go back even previous cycles, is basically the same thing has happened. Maybe not an exact similar type of falling channel right here, but consolidation nonetheless. And then we go back even further to the very first cycle, basically, very similar setup, even with consolidation into the halving. Obviously, wasn't a falling channel, but if we look at this, it's kind of like an ascending triangle. So that's the first thing I wanted to point out was the similarities there. But the other thing is this. If we look at last cycle, because this is where we start defining the catalyst, because there is a difference between macro and shorter term. But the shorter term is the stepping stone. And this is what we watch on the short term. But if we look at last cycle, for instance, just to kind of explain what I mean, this breakout out of this falling channel was the catalyst. But this wasn't like the bull market high was the target out of this falling channel. The target was not that high. But it was a catalyst for the big macro setup. And here was the big macro setup last cycle. If we look at this, it was basically just this massive triangle that was in play for Bitcoin. So Bitcoin broke out of this falling channel, yes, but that was the catalyst for the big breakout. And there's the big breakout, that massive triangle with that massive target to the upside. And Bitcoin ran up. And that was the macro play. The short-term falling channel was the catalyst. And here we are once again. And we have this massive setup, which we can kind of look at as kind of this cup and handle that we have here. Or even, as we've discussed, the potential setup for the inverse head and shoulders, right? Depending on how this really plays out. And we have two massive targets, depending how you're measuring this. If you're measuring this price-wise, we're looking at like around $120,000 to $130,000 target. If we're measuring this just a measured move, we're talking about like over $200,000 or so. So huge macro setup, and the catalyst is right here as similar cycles. And so if we go look at the short-term chart, I want to discuss this. And by the way, I saw another article. It's basically Bitcoin at perfect macro setup, but dip below 58,000 risks 500 million in liquidations. This was talking about the M2 money supply and how Bitcoin is on the macro setting up to have a really strong macro move. But the article, and I'm not going to read through it, but the article is talking about potential short-term downside, $800 million of liquidations if Bitcoin's price fell below 57,500. So here's the catalyst. This could be the macro catalyst for Bitcoin right now. And so we have a really cool macro setup, a couple macro setups, and then we have a really cool just consolidation that Bitcoin is in right now. And for somebody that does technical analysis, and if you're out there, you watching these charts, it's just great. It's just great to have structure on the charts. And this is something that if we're patient enough over the years, as I've been doing these videos, structure just happens, right? It seems messy at first. And in this case, the beginning of this consolidation was a really nice run up. There was absolutely no structure right here in this first fall. And we wonder, like, what will the structure look like? Will we keep falling? And then will we just create like a triangle of some sort? But in this case, we've created a falling wedge, and Bitcoin is within that wedge right now. The catalyst, the breakout confirmation right around currently $69,000 to $70,000 is the upper trend line. But here we are grappling with these moving averages as we've been discussing on the short term. And what I wanted to show you on this daily chart was this. Notice this first swing low back here. Bitcoin fell out of this really nice move, right? So just nice move, falls, starts popping back to the upside. What did Bitcoin do here? If we take the swing low to this swing high and then it fell again, check it out. What is that? It's a higher low Fibonacci. And then we go back and we look again at, and it's not every single time, right? But we look right here, swing low to that swing high, touching the top of that Fibonacci. It's a higher low Fibonacci consolidation. And this is very common in different patterns, symmetrical triangles, a falling channel like this. And now here we are, we put in another swing low. And I want to point out this last swing low, there was not much consolidation. It just ran up to the upper trend line. That obviously doesn't always happen. But right now, what's happening? We're getting some rejection at these moving averages so far. And Bitcoin looks like it actually is consolidating, trying to put in a higher low. And this isn't a guarantee, but if we take the swing low to this swing high of resistance at the moving averages, we have a higher low Fibonacci. And we all would like to see Bitcoin from the swing low run right up to the upper trend line, test the catalyst breakout for the bull run, for the parabolic move. But what if that doesn't happen and Bitcoin sees rejection and actually starts consolidating again for a higher low Fibonacci? This is a more extreme higher low Fibonacci. We're talking about $54,000 to $55,000 at the 618. So it's like right in between 54 and 55. And then the lower area, the 786, around 52. What if that happens? Does that mean that the catalyst for this parabolic bull run is just no longer in play? In my view, it doesn't, because we do have all of these other macro indicators, on-chain metrics. Off the top of my head, I'm just thinking about Bitcoin miner capitulation that just happened, and it looks like miners are bottomed out. That's a very strong signal. That's one signal, not to mention all of the technical analysis signals. So Bitcoin can fall to a Fibonacci, a higher low Fibonacci, down here, back into the lower 50s, looking like it's testing the lower trend line, testing the previous swing low, and then it can continue to the upside even still. These things, these moves, we just have to continually watch, be patient for. But I kind of wanted to bring the macro and the short term together in this way, just a really nice visualized way, but also at the same time anticipating short-term downside, because at the end of the day, none of us know what will happen. I'm just kind of tracking these charts and trying to put it all together myself and just be prepared for every scenario. And that even includes breaking to the downside. This could happen. But it's always zooming out on the weekly, I think is key, because for me, crypto in general has this long-term trajectory that I think will continue. And that's a trajectory of higher highs and higher lows. And how that plays out in this chart, none of us know. But we'll see this cycle, and it kind of all starts with the stepping stones on the short term. So these are my thoughts on Bitcoin today. There's really nothing crazy happening from short-term price perspective, and I thought it'd be cool just to kind of zoom out and look at some of that. So hit the subscribe, hit the like. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I appreciate you. I'll see you in the next video. God bless.